Bam. Okay, I think we're good. We're live. Just changed the thumbnail. We are good to go. Okay, everybody, if you're watching the VOD, welcome. It's your boy Vlhadus with another 1v1 episode. I have an awesome, and you may recognize this guest. You may recognize him from the Throne of Liberty clown fiasco debacle of the auto combat, or you may recognize him from his latest Ashes of Creation YouTube video. It is our boy Neeko2lo. What is going on,
Thank
my
you for
dude?
having me, man. Thank you. I'm
Oh,
good. How are you?
I am well, dude. I am well. I think honestly I've been looking forward to this all week. Like literally,
Me too,
man.
man.
It's and I honestly like I think the podcast that you have with you and Cannon is awesome, dude. Like keep going with that, man. Like I love MMORPG podcasts because there's not that many of them. And I
There
think
aren't that many. That's true.
yeah, there's not that many of them, and I think the conversation around MMOs to like get better systems, advocate for like like companies to like actually get off their asses and do something more than what's being put out. Because I just feel like, especially AAA's, dude, they just do like the bare minimum to get by as an MMO. And I don't know how you feel about that. I mean, I know you're a BDO creator, you're Lost Ark. Monetization is actually, I saw the whole pay to win conversation that you had with Canon and stuff like that. But before we get into any of that stuff, I do want to ask, first of all, like, how did you get into MMOs? Like, what was your first MMO? Like, where did you find your passion in MMORPGs?
That's a good story because when I was, let's say 10, 11, I'm at 28 now. I'll be 29 soon.
Oh, wow.
My cousin was really into WoW, and WoW released like a year or so before that. And I wasn't allowed a PC because my parents thought, oh, he's not going to focus on his studies anymore and that kind of stuff. So all I would ever do is I would go to my cousin's place and watch him play WoW all day. That's all I would do because I was so like, wow, there's other people that
Right.
move with you in there because I was just playing like Pokemon games or something.
Right. Those single player games.
Yeah, exactly. No real multiplayer. It was super interesting. And then after, I think I was either was my 11th or 12th birthday, my dad was like, okay, I'll gift you WoW, but you can only play it on my PC, which is like, I can play it like once a week. I was like, that's fine. It's better than nothing. So I was
Wow.
like, and ever since then, I tried my best to play as much as possible. So now we're here. I started with WoW, obviously, which was still vanilla back then.
Right.
All of the expansions of WoW I played all of the, well, not all of them, but a lot of the free-to-play WoW clones. I played some Runes of Magic. I think All Lots Online was a thing. I played a little bit of Wonder King, which was kind of a MapleStory clone.
Gotcha.
Eventually, then BDO came out, and that was kind of the step for me from just being a player to a content creator.
Gotcha.
So BDO was like 8 years ago now, which is crazy. But that's when I first started streaming and making like some sort of YouTube videos casually. And that was, I think I have like 7,000, almost 8,000 hours in BDO since then.
Oh, okay.
Which, I mean, it is a game where you stand around AFK a lot, but I would probably guess it's at least like 5,000 active hours, which is still a lot.
Jesus.
And then, well, I always tried other MMOs because I'm someone that plays a lot when I can play, and usually I run out of content eventually, and
as do we all.
I need a new game. Yeah, exactly. So I'm always on the lookout for new stuff. And then Lost Ark came out, and then I played a lot of Lost Ark. I think I have like 3,500 hours in that. And
okay.
yeah, now obviously I've always looked at Ashes as well, right? So since it came out in Kickstarter, I was always, somewhat following the game. I also played the Apocalypse, which I actually kind of liked, which
the Battle Royale
made me a little bit more excited because that was around the time that BDO had their own Battle Royale that was called Shadow Arena. And I actually kind of liked Apocalypse more, which is weird. Well, at least the in-game BDO one. And that made me more excited for Ashes. So I kept following it more to the extent where I was actually kind of actively asking questions for their live streams and stuff.
Right.
And yeah, and then again, after now Lost Ark released, New World released, I kind of lost a little bit of the, let's say, passion for following it that closely. So I was just following it through the monthly content updates, basically. So whenever they
Right.
uploaded either the YouTube thing or just the live version of, oh, here's the cleric showcase, or here is the caravan showcase, or whatever.
Right. So I've never really played BDO. I've literally downloaded it. I bought it for $6 because it was on sale on Steam
Yeah.
one time, just to play with the character creator. Because the Ashes character creator came out, and I was
Yeah.
like, hey, if they're modeling after BDO, I want to get inside this thing and actually do stuff myself. And I thought that the character, or the I don't know if it's called the creation library, but it's basically how people can make like templates of characters, and then you can basically run through them. So if you're not a person who likes creating a character, you can look at other people's creations and just be like, that's what I want my character to look like. I think that's amazing. And I really hope Ashes actually does that, because I am a person that I don't like to spend 2 or 3 hours in the character creator trying to customize. I really don't. That it's just not I want to get right into the game. I want to get right into the action. That's just me. But I do want a kind of semblance of, like, if I do create a human, and, you know, they created Asmongold and the Ashes, you know, I would like to create like a likeness of myself, maybe a little more, maybe a little bit more giga chatted, you know, just something a little bit better. But I think, you know, the one question I want to ask, like, as a non-BDO player, and I did play Lost Ark too, do you find the fact of like not feeling as enthusiastic because of the monetization that those games practice, or do you find it's just maybe the lack of content?
I think it's both to an extent. It's a big entry barrier for people, especially in the West, if there's any degree of pay to win. So
Right.
a lot of people say, "Oh, you can buy power in the cash shop to some degree," and they're like, "Okay, I'm not going to play it," which is
Right.
fair. I think if I had the choice, like there was a really good MMO that didn't have a cash shop and a really good MMO that did, I would always pick the one without it, right?
Right.
Um, but right now for Lost Ark and BDO, both of them have a pretty extensive pay to win library, although I would argue that Lost Ark is slightly worse.
Right.
Um, I think the lack of content is probably the bigger issue.
Right.
Because if you do get hooked on the games, they do have a very specific character. So if you like how the game feels, how it plays, how it flows, it's gonna get really well. You kind of just want to keep playing that because there's not really any other game like it, right?
Right.
But and then once you reach that content threshold where you're like, okay, I've kind of done everything, and now I'm just gonna do the same thing over and over and over and over again.
Right.
That's when a lot of people just say, okay, well, I mean, that it was fun while it lasted. I might check up on it again in a couple months if there's new stuff for it. But then they just, you know, especially in Lost Ark, where it's all about the daily routine that you have, your little schedule, your checklist that you follow through.
Right.
For me, anyways, and for a lot of people that I know, it felt like the moment you take a break, maybe, oh, I'm going on a vacation for 2 weeks, and then
Right.
then they come back and they're like, I cannot do this anymore. Like once you're
Right.
out of the hamster wheel,
You
you're
feel
like,
like you're
I don't
done.
want to. Yeah.
And I think that's the problem, honestly, with the daily mentality, right?
Mm,
I think it's an egregious practice that these AAA studios do to keep their metrics, their spreadsheets in line of like showing their investors the trajectory of how our online players are logging in every day and how they're doing content and stuff like that.
exactly.
You know, I love the Yoshi P approach as to like, hey, we're going to give you content. We're trying to give you a decent amount of it. But again, you know, we're not infinite, right? We can't give
Mm,
you infinite amount of content. But, you know, I love the advocation of just being like, if when you're done, like, stop playing. You know, if you need to stop playing for 2 or 3 months, like, I think the mentality of gamers' health has severely declined. I really do. Like, and that's probably a whole other podcast episode just to talk
mm,
about like the mental health crisis in America, but also just I think gamers right now, because if you look pre 2024, I think 2024 has actually been a pretty banger year for games so far. But
sure.
you know, we have like these onesie kind of games that come out. Baldur's Gate 3, Elden Ring. Like that's it. Like, you know, we get these like onesie kind of games that come out. And then while we're not in that glamour of like, oh my God, there's like all these games to play, right? we basically have to meme on the terrible ones like Diablo 4 or, you know,
Mm,
Wayfinders, you know, debacle launch, or,
mm,
you know, just all these different other games that are just doing so terribly. And then we concentrate on that as like either as content creators because, hey, we have no content, so let's meme out the bad content,
yeah,
like the Throne of Liberty stuff, right? Like,
yeah.
but I feel like there's just a lot of takes going on in the MMO side of things. And I don't know if that's due to like the mental exhaustion of not being able to play a good MMORPG, or if it's because people are just literally out of their minds at this point and just waiting for like the, you know, because I know, you know, about the whole Riot cancellation. I mean,
Of
they
course.
basically rebooted. They said, hey,
Yeah.
our current direction, we're not doing that anymore. We're starting all over from scratch, going in another completely different direction. And again, MMOs take time, which we are going to go over in our episode, because
Mm,
that is definitely a subject that I do want to talk to you about. I guess before we get into, you know, the other, like going into the actual episode,
hmm
is there anything you want to like talk about or anything before we officially get started? I don't know, just wanted to give the floor to you.
I mean, I maybe just for the short for the riot stuff.
Okay.
Um, I do think that what they're doing is well. I mean, we don't know anything what they're doing, right?
Yeah, we have
It,
no idea.
but on paper, like the idea of oh, what we made was too close what already existed or exists right now, and we kind of want to reboot it in a direction that kind of moves or evolves the genre forward, right?
Right.
And I do think that's a great step or a great idea for Riot, especially because it's kind of the only established studio with basically infinite resources and an established universe,
Yep.
which is obviously a massive advantage for getting invested into an MMO, right? Just like WoW was in 2004,
Right.
where people are exploring this thing they already kind of know in
Right.
Warcraft 3. And, you know, the same thing goes for the League MMO, the Riot MMO, where everyone's already invested in the League characters and in Arcane and backstories of everything in the lore. And what they have is like a once in a lifetime opportunity to make like an MMO that might have as much impact as WoW had in 2004.
Right.
They have the same prerequisites. Obviously, it could still fail. Obviously, it could still be terrible, but they have the highest chance of making something like that, basically.
I think I've
Yeah.
always said this, that Riot, whenever their MMO comes out, it will be the single biggest MMORPG launch in
Yeah.
history. Because again, you have League of Legends, which has a monthly active users of like 110 million people playing it worldwide. If only
Yeah.
10% play or try the MMO, it's the biggest launch already. You know what I mean? Like, it's
Yeah.
insane. Like, and I think honestly, like, I I think they could have made a cookie cutter RPG with all the, you know, raids, dungeons,
Sure.
you know, and they
Yeah.
would have done massively well. But I
Yeah.
commend them for actually wanting to look at the
Yeah.
MMO genre and be like, well, that's already WoW, that's Final Fantasy, that's Guild Wars 2. Like, you can, again, it's just it would be a skin of Runeterra. And I know a lot of people would like that because that's what us as MMORPG fans are used to getting, basic bitch MMOs. And I really want
Yeah.
to get out of this. And this is why I became a content creator for Ashes, because the Ashes philosophy is just so far radically different than anything we have on the current market. So, yeah, I feel like we can talk about the
That's
whole.
a great segue.
I know, right? Yeah. So, are you ready to get started on this episode?
Sure.
All right, let's get started then. All right, recording in 3, 2, and 1. Hey guys, welcome back to the 1v1 podcast. I am your host Vlhadus, coming to you live from YouTube and Twitch, and I have a very infamous YouTuber with us today. I have, if you may recognize him from the Throne of Liberty clown fiasco debacle of auto combat, or you may recognize him from his latest Ashes creation video, Neeko2lo. What is going on, my dude?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about some Ashes of Creation content.
I am as well. And I want to start off like immediately talking about the subject matter at hand. Are you not excited for Ashes?
I mean, the title was a little bit hyperbolic for sure,
Okay.
but
Let's just start off with the bang. Let's just go.
but I mean, there's still some truth to it in the sense
Right.
that I used to be way more excited, and that basically stemmed from me following it since the Kickstarter launched. kind of religiously, because on paper, to this day, I still think Ashes sounds amazing.
Right.
And I had the same idea back in the day too. And when I then started playing the Apocalypse, which had its own problems with the monetization stuff, but I actually liked Apocalypse for what it was, for
Mhm.
such an early version of the combat system or whatever. And that kind of hooked me a little bit more even into the game. But I don't know how long. Do you know when Apocalypse released?
2019.
So that was like 5 years ago, almost, probably something like that. And
Yep.
that's a long time
Yeah,
to be excited for something.
absolutely.
And yeah, that was kind of the idea of the video, because I was like, I've been following it for so long. I do like what they have on paper, but I just don't see it yet. And that's
Right.
kind of what hampered my excitement, I guess.
Well, I mean, I would just say, and again, I've been playing the MMO genre for almost 16, 17 years now. Golly. I'm still, my brain 2024. I'm just not used to that. Anyway, it's one of those things that it's a monster project. It is the
Yeah,
biggest, most ambitious project I have ever seen a company try to tackle, because I would not see a AAA company doing what Ashes is doing right now. And again, it's because resources, right? Because again, a AAA studio can get like 250, 300 developers day one of their project. Like
sure.
we're talking about in our pre-show about the right MMO, they'll have 300 plus developers starting their MMO like immediately. And again, it'll still take 7, 8 years potentially for them to do that, even with the best, most top-notch developers. But is Ashes a good project? Does it have a solid direction? I personally think I do. I mean, I think they do. I think it is a little ambitious, but I appreciate the ambitiousness of it all. You know what I mean? Because again, like we were talking on a pre-show about, these cookie cutter MMOs that have been coming out, right? Like, oh, you're gonna, basically level from 1 to max level in a single day, and then you're gonna grind dungeons and raids on a weekly lockout. That's literally what you do.
Yep.
There's nothing in the open world for you to really do that's meaningful. Yes, you can go maybe get some transmog or just grind or whatever you want to do, but for the most part, you're just stuck doing the same old, same old. And I think that's pretty gross in today's. I mean, can we not evolve, beyond this point, and again, we're talking about with the right MMO of how they want to try to do something different now
Mhm.
with the certain practices that Ashes is doing with their game loops, right? I personally think that their end game loops start pretty early, right? Like I think there's going to be a lot of different core stuff, of what you're going to do on a daily basis. Now, I guess because I do want to mention the whole too ambitious thing, because I know that was something you mentioned.
Mm.
Do you think Ashes is too ambitious, or like how do you feel like they should have gone about it?
So I mean, because they're so ambitious, or due to them being very ambitious, I got excited for it, right?
Right.
That was kind of the initial hook for me, that they're like, yeah, we kind of want to do this differently. Like we want to evolve the genre. And I'm one of those people, I do enjoy the more sandbox approach. I'm still sad that I didn't get to play Arcade when it was in its prime, and I played it way
Right.
later with the Unchained version.
Right.
And also, I have again like 7,000 hours in BDO, so I really enjoy the sandbox feel, and that you have kind of a free form content flow where
Right.
every day you log in, you're like, okay, what am I gonna do today? Am I gonna go fishing? Am I gonna do world PvP, dungeons, grinding, whatever? I can do whatever, and there's no like lockout or schedule to it in that sense.
Right.
And I really enjoy that. And the node system was also super interesting, because I also really enjoy novelty in MMOs, which I think in the modern day and age is really hard to even find at all, because of the internet, right? Because of guides, because of Discord servers, because of everyone knowing everything before it releases, which was kind of a point of the video too.
Right.
Um, and since I play a lot of Korean MMOs, that has always been a problem, because they get the content way earlier than everyone else, right?
True.
So whenever a new Lost Ark raid, for example, releases, it takes like 6+ months for it to arrive in the West. And by that time, there's 5+ content creators and more that have already done extensive guides and min-maxing of everything already. And at that point, it's kind of necessary. So if you want to find a group, at a new release, oftentimes they're saying you have to have watched the guide. Like if you haven't watched the guide about it, we're not going to take you,
Right.
because everyone is on a schedule. Everyone wants to get their weekly stuff done, and
Right.
everyone wants the rewards at the end of the day.
Right.
And yeah, that's kind of my biggest worry, including the ambition part, obviously, because the node system, while I really enjoy what it brings and what like novelties every server will have, that every server has like somewhat of a different feel to it. There's maybe even different items depending on what dungeons are unlocked or quest lines or whatever. And I love that. But I
Right.
do think having, I think 85 or 86 nodes, and I think that was only in the beginning, is insane to even just wrap your head around, like how much
Right.
work that is.
Oh, dude, yeah.
Like that's, yeah, 85 zones with different quest lines, different. I mean, the towns are a little bit player driven, I guess, but different dungeons, the items, maybe. That sounds like something not even 1,000 dev studio can do.
I think innovation is always super scary. I can only imagine
Sure.
the guy who created VHSs talking to the guy who's about to create DVDs and saying, "Yeah, like the your VHS. I'm gonna put this on a laser disc." Guy's like, "What?
Yeah,
How?
yeah.
How are you gonna put my 2.5 hour movie on this stupid disc? Like that doesn't make no sense to me." And again, I think innovation's always scary. And there was a quote that you said, and I don't know if this is off of your skepticism, but it says, "Can a
Sure.
normal indie studio make this kind of content?" No, I don't think so. I really disagree with this because to me personally, I think an indie studio, even as green as Intrepid, right? They've never put out a game before or anything like that. I think if there is something they're doing that is truly innovative and ambitious, I feel like that to me, as the person wanting to purchase that product, I'm not saying they're incapable of it, but I think I would rather you just have more time to do it. It's like
Sure.
it's like a person who wants to be a chef for the first time and they want to make a very ambitious dish, like Gordon Ramsay's beef Wellington. It's
Sure.
like, what wouldn't you want to start off like with something else? You know what I mean? But if that chef is like, dude, no, as a first time chef, I want to do this dish first, I wouldn't recommend it. But hey, Steven is ambitious, dude, and I think he's trying to make the beef Wellington as his first dish, and I think, hey, applaud. But I just want you to kind of expand on this statement real quick on like, can a normal indie studio make this kind of content? No, I don't think so.
So even for games that are much smaller and have much, I think actually we can go back to even a more generalized statement
Okay.
that MMOs as a whole have shrunk
Okay.
over the past 20 years, and instead of expanded, which is has been a problem. I don't know why that really happened.
Right.
But I, just as an example, when WoW released, there were 8 races with female and male options,
Right.
with I think 8 different classes. Obviously, not every race could be every class, but that's a lot of animation work you need to do. That's a lot of balancing you need to do with racial abilities, different class talent trees, professions, extensive professions too, with their own quest lines as well.
Right.
A lot of dungeons, a lot of, like, even in the beginning already a lot of raids in the pipeline.
Oh yeah.
Open world PvP, battlegrounds eventually. Like there was so much to it.
Yeah, that's great.
And nowadays, I think MMOs are falling into the trap of just catering to one specific type of content.
Right.
Lost Ark raiding, for example. Modern WoW, Mythic Plus End raiding, and I guess instance content in general.
Right.
BDO even nowadays is trying to get a little bit more into the single player instance niche with how they do open world stuff now.
Right.
And it's just kind of feels like everything is being reduced.
Right.
And then seeing Ashes coming around and saying, you know what, guys, we do the opposite. We just make we just make it way bigger than anything you've ever seen.
Right.
I love the idea of that.
Right.
I really do. But I just don't. At least from what we've seen so far over the course of the last, I don't know, 7 years of development.
Right.
How far these systems have evolved.
Right.
It's just very hard for me to see like how much longer it's going to take, basically.
Right.
from what we see now. I think they have talked about like maybe showing a little bit more of this node stuff. There was a little bit, at least for me, a little bit controversial, where they showed like this black smoke coming out of the node in the last showcase.
Oh, right. That's
Yeah,
it.
and
Or go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
you go ahead.
Okay.
Go.
Well, okay. So that was another lead into the next part. I guess before I mention that, I will just say that I appreciate Intrepid for trying to actually go outside of the norm, because again, it would be up to a AAA studio with the resources to actually get beyond this very simplistic approach to MMORPGs. I mean, God, look at New World, you know, but again, I think New World had its own slew of issues. I think they originally wanted to be a survival game that was like all drop loot kind of experience. And they were like, hey, well, no, let's make it an MMO and like, let's do this. And I think it was just a mismanaged project in general, what New World went through. But yeah, I do want to talk about feature confusion, because even one of my friends that watches the Ashes live streams without really, he's never even been to the Ashes wiki. If you ask, or he has any kind of question about Ashes, he just like texts me or asks me, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, hey, you know,
probably a good idea.
right. You know what I mean? And so this is kind of what I was talking about in my live stream a couple of streams ago is, you know, feature confusion for new players watching a live stream from Ashes, like the node leveling. You talked about that in your recent video on, you know, even my friend asked me, he's like, was that black mist a node, or like, was that the node area? And like, he was just kind of asking me like, is this what a node is going to look like when it levels? And I said, no. I said, and again, I think this is also Intrepid a little bit, because they are almost catering these live streams to people in the know. Like, you are our community. We made this specifically for you guys, but anybody that's not watching this live stream, you might be lost on what we show you.
I got a lot of those questions too.
Right.
People were confused. Like, what is this even? What is a node?
Right. Yeah. No one even, like, again, my friend, again, he goes, isn't it node like a town? Like, isn't it like a village or something like that? It's not like a forest, right? And I said, well, a node can be in a forest. Like a node can have different aesthetics, but we're not used to the word node the same way we're used to dungeons, raids, you know, open world. That's a very foreign word in the MMORPG, you know, vocabulary. So I guess, did you want to go and talk about a little bit of like, you know, whether the node is functioning, or like, is this really like feature confusion for new players? Like, do you find this to be a little bit problematic?
So I think the only other game I know that where node is used is BDO, and the BDO nodes are also, I guess, somewhat similar, where it's more of an area,
right? But
it doesn't function the same way at all. So a lot of people were I think even I am confused about the nodes to an extent,
right?
I think the biggest part of confusion about the previous live stream was basically like, everyone watching it with me was like, there's like this black dust happening, and then they walked to it, and then what did it even really do? It said like node leveled up,
right?
And then they kind of said something along the lines of that a new story has unlocked or something like that,
right?
And I think that's definitely something they will need to explain a little bit further, like, especially for people who aren't familiar with the game, how that actually works, or what node leveling up even means. Like, what does it mean, an area to level up? What does that even do?
Right.
For me personally, the biggest thing I want to see is that it's just like, even if it's just a level 1 node to a level 2 node,
right,
what that actually entails physically. Like, if you're playing the game and I'm in a level 1 node and it levels up, what does that mean for me? Is every node completely different? That even like this node leveled up, there's a quest line over there. Now that story now leads into the next story of the level 3 node. So you know, you need to level the node from 2 to 3 to continue the storyline. Or are the storylines a little more fragmented? Or like, what does that really mean for me as a player when a node levels? Besides the town part, and you know, this node, I have my own little abode where I dwell in or whatever. Like, what does that mean for me from a moment to moment gameplay perspective, basically?
Right. And I think that's fair. Again, like, I know everything that happened in the live stream because I entrench myself in Ashes content on a daily basis. You know what I mean? So I don't expect to be lost while watching this live stream, but I would expecting people like onlookers, like even you,
Mm,
you know, you probably don't entrench yourself in Ash's content on a daily
yeah.
basis, but you know the project. And now
Mm,
imagine, you know, being farther removed from that and have your
yeah.
viewers who probably may not even watch Ash's content, you know, watch this live stream with you. And now again, this is where the kind of confusion, but also the game of telephone happens, right? Where this is how misinformation starts to happen, right? Because then they try to interpret what they saw as what they think happened. And then they
Yeah.
start telling their friends, oh, well, this is what happened in live stream, even though that's not really what happened at all. And I think it's just a bad thing of telephone at the end of the day. And basically what you're asking is for Nodes 3. Steven, where the hell is Nodes 3? Intrepid, please get on that. I think a lot of people have been wanting just a better breakdown on Nodes, because last year they did do a Nodes presentation, but
Mm,
it was more so a mayoral presentation, not really a Nodes presentation. They did show you
yeah.
the node and everything in Marilith and everything like that. But I mean, it wasn't what people wanted to see from nodes, like exactly what you wanted to actually see. Like if I'm in the town and the node levels, what happens? Do I get booted out of the
Exactly.
town like in Alpha 1? Right. And if so, everybody that was in the town gets booted out like 60 yards back, and then we have to re-enter the node. Or like, does it actually happen naturally where I'm talking to the blacksmith and stuff just blah 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 blah, you know,
Mm,
happens, you know? Or maybe if you've ever played Warlords of Draenor in World of Warcraft, when you're
I
garrison
did.
levels,
Yeah.
there's like a certain kind of cinematic that happens, and then, you know, poof, like you kind of go on the outskirts and you have to, you know, walk back in. I don't
Mm,
know, you know, we all don't know. And I think honestly, the other question too is because there are types of nodes, right? There's like military, scientific, economic, religion, and all of those nodes are static. So like in every server, even though all of them are going to be different, you know, where
yeah.
Marilith is, if Marilith is like a military node, then that's what that node is. Marilith will always be a military node.
Yeah.
Because I had another friend ask me, I was like, well, what about these categories? Are these going to be, because he, again, especially it's so dangerous when you know a bit of information, because he says, or he
Mm,
told me, he's like, well, isn't every server going to be random? So like, can Marilith be a military node and then on another server, it can be a scientific node? Like, can players choose, you know, what
mm,
kind of category a node could be? And I'm like, no, sadly not. You know what I mean? It's all static. And again, I think there's just a lot of expectation of explanation, you know, because of how I think not the bad thing, it's just this game is so dense. It is the George R. Martin of MMORPGs. To learn a single storyline in this freaking game, you literally have to put out a dissertation because
mm.
of how much information is on there, because it's also connected to other systems. Most of these systems
Yeah.
aren't standalone systems because these systems often work in tandem with one another, especially the node system. And I know you were saying you didn't mention that there were certain systems not functioning or not online at all. And were you referencing the node developing, or were you just referencing like systems in general?
I mean, systems in general is obvious, right? There's
Right,
obviously a lot of things that they haven't really shown yet.
right,
I think the node, especially, also looked like it was kind of a I, I kind of want to say a theater play where they have this animation for the node leveling up, and there's
right,
like these things happening, and they're like, okay, there's this UI popping up, the node leveled up, and then there's like a cinematic experience. They're
right,
on like this tower and they're overlooking this happening.
right,
But there was no like actual mechanical like feature yet. It just looked like a movie, you know,
right,
like something that they just showcased
right,
in that sense. That's kind of what I'm worried about.
right,
Because the node system is so ambitious, and as you said, it is so crucial for a lot of other systems in the game to function properly.
right,
That if that system isn't properly fleshed out, it might just tear down everything else with it.
right,
So that's kind of what I'm worried about with the node system. That's why I was so worried about how ambitious it is and how many nodes there are.
right.
That if I don't know how they can handcraft so many different systems, storylines. I don't know. I know they talked about a little bit about procedural stuff to an extent.
Right.
I don't know if that's still up to date though.
Right. I mean, did you know that the nodes used to be 103 before they
Yeah, I
scaled?
did know that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
before they scaled it back to 85.
yeah.
So I think again, there's a lot of, I give Intrepid a lot of leeway. And maybe it's because of more of my hopium, copium, whatever you want to call it. But also it's because I actually see passion from this company. So when I look at like a company like 11th Hour Games, who just did Last Epoch, these
Mm,
developers, man, I love developers like these, like Intrepid,
they're
like
great.
like
Yeah.
11th Hour Games, like Larian Studios. We need more of these companies, and I champion these companies. And as much as I want to be skeptical, because I do agree, we're going to talk about, the whole echo chamber conversation a little
Mm,
bit later, but um I think, to be championing these companies, but also speaking straight to them, right? Like not being a yes man, saying, hey, if there's
mm,
if there's legit concerns, voice those concerns. Like, what do you want out of this system, right? Understanding their philosophies, understanding their foundations of their systems. Like, you need to do this, because if not, then what's really the point of feedback? They're not going to be getting the proper feedback that they actually need to be better, right? And again, I think I give Intrepid a lot of leeway when it comes to like not showing something, because I don't see any other, like, they don't have a template. They can't look at BDO or Guild Wars 2 or any other MMORPG with a lot of their systems, especially the note
mm.
system, because no one's done it, right? Like, so it's really hard, like, for me, knowing that and trying to be like, well, Intrepid, you should have done this, or maybe you shouldn't have done that
Yeah.
system. It's like, well, no, I appreciate them trying to even do a system like this, because there isn't a system like this in MMOs. And I think if they can nail the landing, holy shit,
Mm,
man, this is why I have such faith in this project, because I think so many other MMOs like BDO, World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy 14, if Intrepid comes out swinging, it's going to force these other MMOs to freaking evolve. Because if Intrepid fails, then they can just keep, they're like, oh, thank God, we can just
yeah.
keep doing what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
Basically drip feeding you content every 6 months, and again, because we know that's what they're doing. You know what I mean? A lot of these companies, like, they make it sound like putting one raid out as this monolith task, like, of craziness. You know what I mean? It's like, well,
Mm,
God, you can expect us to do an hour's worth of questing content for this new patch and a new raid and then another new raid. Like, it's like, dude, I just, and this is why I think the AAA studio, for me, why I've kind of fell out of love, especially with World of Warcraft. I'm a WoW Andy.
mm.
Like, I've been a WoW Andy for 16 years. I quit because the vision of retail was not something that I can just jive with anymore. Like, I I don't know. I mean, do you still play BDO, or are you a BDO player still, or have you just kind of
Rarely,
rarely?
just super casually. I'm barely in the loop. Sometimes,
Right.
sometimes I do play a little bit. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I honestly, like, for me, I literally fell out of World of Warcraft. I know Asmongold did his whole take as to what he would change for retail, but I think, I said yesterday on my stream, I think he advocated for the wrong game. I think he needs to advocate more so for classic WoW and leave retail alone. Because again, I think Ian Hazakostas, who is the lead game designer for retail
Mm,
WoW, like, he's a competitive, like, MDI 1%er kind of player. Like, that's his philosophy. That's what he wants to do. So instead of trying to change retail, Asmon needs to really try to advocate change in classic and have them do an expansion of classic that isn't Burning Crusade, and go in a
that isn't
whole,
a gimmick.
yes, and just go in a whole new direction. Keep 40-man rating, get rid of add-ons, and like, I don't know. Like, I feel like there's so much they can do with the classic era approach anyway, because there's more people that love that genre, or that
Mm,
game mode better. Retail has
yeah.
its place, has its audience, but there's so many more people that are just hungrier for classic. And I think this is why I think Ashes also has a lot of potential too, because there is a lot of classic system approaches in Ashes that really doesn't compare a lot to these modern MMOs. So I guess, we can kind of move on, unless you have anything else to say about that subject.
I mean, I do think that the more classic approach, also in WoW, is the more MMORPG way of doing things. Because I do think that retail is, and that also kind of goes for Lost Ark because it's actually very similar in a lot of ways.
Right.
It's more of an arcade game. Like you
Mm.
there's different little machines that you can go to. This is the Mythic Plus one, this is the rating one, this is the arena one, and that's, you get funneled into that, and that's about it. Obviously, I think Dragonflight tried to change that a little bit, but I didn't play it, to be fair.
You didn't miss much, really.
Yeah.
Just I mean, it was good, but it was just good. Like it wasn't
Mm,
fantastic. It was like if you missed out, like, oh, okay, whatever. But it's not like you missed on anything
yeah,
monumentally amazing, you know? So
yeah. I think Asmund also talked about that a little bit, that Dragonflight is basically just another Legion expansion. It's kind of the same thing again, just
sort of, yeah.
slight differences in a way.
Yeah.
And I do think also that Ash is going back on a lot of the risk versus reward things back in the day, and
Right.
like that the world needs to be a little bit more dangerous, and there's communication and and drama maybe even between players, more so that the players are kind of the storyline to an extent as well, right?
Right.
And that's usually what a sandbox MMO tries to do anyways.
Right.
Is a really good approach, and that's also again like the main reason why I was interested and intrigued by their on paper design philosophies.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So going on to the, this is probably going to cause a lot in the chat. So chat, be respectful. Be respectful. How outdated the combat system looks already. Now, I wanted to get this
Yeah.
quote from you. You said that the Ashes combat looked outdated. Can you
Mm.
expand on this? Because when I first heard this, I was like, outdated. I was like, I was trying to understand where you're coming from. I didn't know. I think someone in chat says, "Oh, he's a BDO player," and then I was thinking, "Oh, is he referring to like it not being action and it being more tab?" Or you answer this. You know,
Yeah.
you're the one who said it. So let's go into it.
So my two most, I mean, actually, my three most played games are WoW, BDO, and Lost Ark.
Mhm.
And probably like BDO the most, then probably WoW, then Lost Ark, but
Right.
something like that.
Right.
And Ashes reminds me a lot of Arcage, from what I could tell. Obviously, I couldn't play it yet,
Mm. Okay.
but from what I could see, it reminded me a lot of Arcage. And even within the tab targeting sphere, people would say that Guild Wars 2, for example, is better. Now, there is a lot of things that they wanted to have with the split kind of between the tab targeting combat and action combat abilities, right?
Right.
To have like both integrated to an extent. And that would then also make it like be much closer to a Guild Wars 2, because Guild Wars 2 has a lot of that too.
Right.
Um, but then again, let's even assume, which I think is the best tab target game, is Guild Wars 2. Even if we assume Ashes is as good or slightly better than it,
Mhm.
Guild Wars 2 came out like, I mean, I have the original box here when it released like 15 years ago or 16. That's pretty old, right?
Right.
Or maybe it's less, but like it's pretty old. It's a pretty old game. So if Ashes makes a combat system that is like Guild Wars 2, a little bit better, maybe,
Right.
that is for the onlookers of MMORPGs, anyways,
Right.
seems like an outdated system, because they saw their dad play WoW 20 years ago and they're like, oh, that looks kind of similar in a way, you know? And
Gotcha.
that's, I think, especially because there's modern combat systems like BDO and Lost Ark that are very intuitive and very just, they feel very polished and modern, and they flow very well. So much more than a tab target system usually can. And I think for the onlooker crowd that is playing other games, maybe because they're just waiting for a new MMO to come out,
Right.
which I think there's a lot of them actually, um, is it feels a little bit outdated to have a combat system that is more akin of something like 10 plus years ago, than again evolving it in some sort of way to look more maybe like a new generation combat system would be.
Okay. So, I'm just curious. And you, if you were the person creating this combat, what what two games would you want to fuse together to make this is what Ashes combat should be? Because like for me, I
Mm.
think of Lost Ark, and I think it's a lot of rooted combat animations, which I'm not a fan of. I don't like being rooted when I hit a button and my character basically goes on its little tangent of craziness, and then once the
Mm.
ability's over, it stops. BDO has a lot of rooted animations as well. So, are you? How should I phrase this question? Do you think BDO and Lost Ark's combat is outdated too? Let me ask that question first.
Um, well, it depends on how. I would still consider BDO and Lost Ark to be a older generation MMO. I think
Okay.
all of them. I think WoW kind of echoed in like the golden ages that were more polished and everything was a little bit more free flowing and everything was a little less static and you could move a little bit more. And
Right.
then there were games that tried a little bit more with something like Dragon Nest, which was very action combat. And then also something like BDO and Lost Ark, where both of them, while they do have some static stuff, they give you a lot of control over it, which I think is very important. Um, and with that control comes also a lot of skill ceiling and like progression in just understanding how to even in what order you want to press the buttons maybe,
Right.
or which ability flows well into another one, because
Right.
BDO has a lot of BDO is overall a little bit of a scuffed game. The entire engine doesn't really work super well, and that kind of leads to a combat system that can be exploited to an extent,
Okay.
where some abilities, animations can be entirely canceled, which oftentimes is intended, but sometimes isn't.
Right.
Um, and that makes it like once you understand how to do it and how to flow with your class, it feels incredibly satisfying. Like it's like in the beginning, it feels very stiff and weird, but once you understand like how to sequence everything together, it
Right.
feels very, very nice and fluid. So I would say if I had to combine anything right now, it's actually it would I really like the polish of how Lost Ark combat feels. It feels very responsive. There's almost like very few bugs or anything like that. So
Okay.
if you press something, it does what it's supposed to.
Right.
With the addition of a lot of them can also be canceled with a dodge, for example.
Right.
So you have control over that situation. But since Ashes is trying to go for the tap targeting approach, I would say leaning more into the action and less into the tab would be something that I would like to see more of.
Wait, you
Um,
want them to focus more on tab than action?
no, more into action than
Oh, okay.
tab.
Oh, okay.
Maybe I misspoke.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I didn't I didn't hear. I was like, wait, what?
Maybe I
Okay.
misspoke. So like I would basically take like if they want to go through with their current direction of the combat, I really like the I think I don't know if it was the fighter showcase where the guy had a great sword that was like a year or two ago.
Oh
I
yeah.
really like that showcase. It felt a
Yes.
lot more free flowing. But when
Right.
I look at something like
The
the mage
mage.
especially, yeah, I really dislike what they're doing with that one. So more leaning into the fighter approach and more like maybe using Guild Wars 2 as like an inspiration and like evolving from that into a more fluid system.
So, Nico, I think you're gonna love the fighter showcase this month. I really do.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm looking forward to that one.
I honestly, and again, I as an MMORPG player, I play everything: tank, healer,
Yeah.
DPS, magical ranged, physical ranged, whatever. Like I've played it all. In my approach, and I said this yesterday, I think on my live stream, melee needs to be more action oriented. Their abilities need to be more integral to action based combat, because I've never seen tab be more freeing than action, right? And I think as a
Mm,
melee player, it just feels
mm.
better to be in a free flow action
Yeah,
view,
for
you know.
context, I'm a melee player.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Because I can
yeah.
guarantee you, if you were a healer, you would not be advocating for action. and and I
Probably.
and I think this is where context is so important. Because when you say combat, you're talking overall, like all the different combat
Mm,
approaches, like DPS, tanking, healing, like
yeah.
everything. And again, I think there are certain ways, and this is why I love the hybrid approach that Intrepid is going with, because I think, again, if you look at Alpha 1, there was a lot that was completely different with combat in Alpha 1,
Hmm.
and they radically changed the combat from Alpha 1 to the melee showcase that you're talking about
Yeah,
with
I really like that showcase.
right. And it was based
Mm,
off of feedback in Alpha 1. And this is the whole thing too, is that I honestly feel that there's not too many people in the Ashes community that are yes men. There was a lot of really negative feedback in the Alpha 1 that Intrepid, they were like, okay, like, because
that's good.
there was a lot of rooted animation that was in combat. So they were basically testing split body or rooted animation and what they liked better, and the community was like, we like the split body approach better, we like being in control of our players rather than we hit a button and then we go flying like 15 feet because like what if we're playing near a cliff, or what if like there's a certain platform that we have to stay on, like you know what I mean, and then you have to have these invisible walls and all this sort of stuff, like so I think the player ultimately wants control, but they also want weight. And this is where I think sound animation, or like sounds and animations, play, I think, an even greater role in melee combat, because melee, when you get to hear a flesh sound that is gratifying, it makes, as a melee player, you feel like on cloud 9. And especially when the because I think certain sounds in Lost Ark sound freaking amazing, like especially coming from some of the melee combat, like was it the shadow hunter? Oh my god, some of the ripping sounds of like the flesh, or like when you're hitting mobs, it feels so gratifying. And I really feel like Intrepid is going to do something special with melee. But how I always envisioned it was to have melee be more action and have healers be more tabbed, and then have ranged, like maybe mages or rangers, having a mixture of both. So there's an ability that this ability that you cast is an action ability. There's no way you can tab target this ability. This is a directional action ability. And I think that should be the same way on the ranger. And I think you, as the player, having a choice of maybe 30 to 40 abilities, you can craft your toolkit to either be more action oriented or more tab oriented, whatever you're more comfortable with. And I think the other thing too is that we have a pretty older community here in the action space. So, we're not all in our 20s over here. I'm going to be in my 40s soon. There's a lot of people that have arthritis. We're using, dude, I have gloves that I wear, because
I actually have one of those.
Like, dude, my wrists are not the same playing MMOs for 16 years. So I think, again, it's just a matter of, I think when I hear someone say outdated, like I think of, okay, is it the sounds that are outdated? Is it the animations that are outdated? Is it the way the spell looks? Because I think there's still some spells, like the mage ability. I'll make an example. Many people don't like the lightning orb that comes out. I think it looks really bad. A lot of people don't like that ability, but I think we've been very vocal about it, and we're just waiting for Intrepid to update it, or to see like what they're going to want for direction. But I feel like there's going to be so much and just like your video on Throne of Liberty, man, like it was content creators like you that brought to light the combat stuff that was going on Throne of Liberty, and make this a priority for them. Because I guarantee you, if people didn't do what you did and they just accepted this auto combat system,
especially in Korea,
like that would have been what they came out with. They're like, oh, no one's complaining, we did the right thing, let's release it out. And I think that's the beauty of us as content creators, and us actually having a voice in this space, because I think it's just important for these developers to like, oh crap, like maybe that's not something we should do. Now, mind you, Throne of Liberty was probably more on the monetization kick than trying to get really good combat going, but I think for companies like Intrepid, like 11th Hour Games, like Larian, sometimes they fumble. Sometimes internally they think, wow, this is a good system, and then they could go to their players, and their players like, no, it's not. this is terrible. And I think, again, sometimes rethinking certain approaches, or not, and I think this is honestly the case with Intrepid too. I think the reason why they don't show a lot of completed systems is because if they do need to pivot due to feedback, like what me and you're talking about, they can. Because I've heard, especially in World of Warcraft, man, I heard this shit so many times that I was getting so aggravated, is, well, we can't do that now because we already did it. Like, the system's done. Like, if we change it the way, like when they did the whole stuff in Shadowlands about covenants, and they said, well, we can't just change it now. Like, it's all coded in, like, and what happened when people were unhappy? They found some way to change that damn system. And again, I think Intrepid doesn't want to get too far in the coding part, or just like in the ways of animations or something, because there's just so much that goes into the combat system in general. And I think they want to give us a more basic look approach. So that way, okay, is this what you guys like? Do these sounds, these animations, does all of this stuff look gratifying as a melee player, as someone who wants to be a fighter class? And I think this is where I'm really excited about this showcase, because again, there was a huge update last year or I think honestly that melee showcase was 2 years ago. Holy shit.
Yeah,
It
probably.
was 2 years ago. Holy crap. Okay, so yeah, 2 years ago. And I think, again, the reason why they probably haven't shown a lot of melee combat is because they've been hard at work and trying to see internally, what is good to them. Like, does this, because if it's good to them, usually it's going to be good to us. Because the other thing about Steven too is that he's been hiring people with MMO mindset, like not just
Mm,
developers that don't play games. Like he hires people that have this MMO first, mindset, which is really, really
mm.
good. So, yeah, like what do
I
you
mean,
think about all that? Sorry.
one question I had for you maybe was, since you played Lost Ark, I don't know how to what extent you did. Um,
Oh, small
what
extent.
did you think about the support players? Because it's obviously
Mm,
not a healer,
right.
but it's also a support type of player that focuses solely basically on being a supportive role
Right.
in an action combat system, right?
Right. Yeah. So like Paladin, I played very little of. So I played a Shadow Hunter. My friend actually played the Paladin. So I was kind of, he was telling me like, oh dude, I have this ability where I can like give you this buff and stuff like that.
Mm,
And I think honestly in Lost Ark it works because there's
mm.
no DPS meter. I think
I mean, you
people,
can, you can,
well,
if you're doing illegal stuff, you can. But
yeah, okay,
yeah.
okay. So you're doing illegal stuff, you can. But I think overall that there isn't I don't, at least in my opinion, I don't think there's an add-on community, a mentality as
Mm,
similar to World of Warcraft, right? Like even
sure.
a brand new player already knows about add-ons and how to get add-ons and download add-ons.
Mm,
Lost Ark's not really that. And I think there's just too much emphasis on add-ons because, especially when it comes to DPS, the DPS
mm,
EPing is too freaking high
yeah.
right now. And games that don't show these meters, people that, because again, I think if they showed support and you saw that you were doing like 10% of damage that a Shadow Hunter does, you'd be like, screw this support class. I don't want to play this thing. But I think because they don't see the numbers and they see, oh wow, like I'm actually helping people. Like I feel viable. I feel good in being a support class. I think that's where I think not only Lost Ark shines, but just support classes in general, because most MMORPGs don't do support classes at all.
Yeah.
That's a part of it once was a part of the Trinity, but it's
Mm,
not. It's just healers, tanks, and DPS. And
mm,
back in the old like Arc Age, EverQuest, there were true support classes. And again, this is another aspect that Steven wants to bring back with the Bard and potentially also with the Summoner class in Ashes. We haven't seen them yet. we can
mhm,
we can only assume, but I always love, again, especially with certain directional combat abilities. I don't
mm,
care if it's action or tab, but being able to do even somewhere similar to like the augmentation evoker in World of Warcraft right now, because
mm,
that's basically a support class too. Um, and basically just doing the things that actually feel like you're helping out your raid or your group. Because even though you may not be doing a lot of damage in Lord of the Rings Online, you always had a bard in your raid. Like that was like a mandatory slot that you
mm.
filled. And I love that approach. Is it the same way in Lost Ark? Like a paladin or some kind of support in a raid group is just needed? Like you need to have one?
So the gist of it is that if you have a support, you can clear everything technically without one.
Mm-hmm.
But by having one, not only do you actually do more damage because the
Right.
buffing that they do
Right.
actually results in more than just an additional DPS player.
Right.
So
Especially if
it's
they're
very
skilled.
crucial. Exactly. And on top of that, you have tools on supports that mitigate um, damage, right? So that's a big thing because you only have a limited amount of potions per fight. So having a class that can heal a little bit, that can provide shielding in moments where there's maybe a little bit too much chaos, is incredibly helpful, and it makes
Right.
everything feel way smoother and easier than without one.
Right.
And that's why I mean, like, you can technically create a healer or a support like that in an action combat system. It's kind of tricky to do, and it's very tricky to balance it too.
Right.
But I think it's possible. And the same kind of goes for ranged. Although I do agree that if we are just talking about very traditional healers,
Right.
like we see in WoW or Final Fantasy, not having tab targeting is I don't know if that's even possible to have such a traditional approach. All you do is heal, and you have a literally a heal meter in WoW, right? Where you
Right.
can literally that's all you do. Right?
Right.
So that's I think very hard to do if it's not tab target. But I think everything else that goes beyond that is actually very nice in action, because that requires a little bit more group thinking, because a lot of the abilities that you're going to do are maybe area based or surrounding you in a circle or something like that. So your team kind of has to play around the support a little bit more and be aware of the positioning of the support, maybe a
Right.
little bit more so than in a tap target environment.
Right. I mean, you basically have to have a healer mentality as a support class,
Mm,
because you got to be very
yeah,
cognizant of where your melee group is, where your range group is, where your healers
exactly.
are. Like, and especially because a lot of support have proximity buffs. So, this
Yeah,
buff that shouts out is a 10-yard buff. And,
yeah,
and especially with games with no add ons, you have to be very cognizant of like, I got to run
yeah.
over here, push this button, while simultaneously DPSing, and then run over here and do this thing.
Mm,
And sometimes like you even have abilities that can be gap closers to like latch on to friendly targets to like get to them even faster and closer to like help them
exactly.
out or to damage mitigate or all this other stuff, which I really love that. I think
Mm,
there's a lot of missteps in the current trend of MMORPGs that they need to get back to basics. You know what I mean? I think
mm,
they've tried to keep going with the same old, and they need to go back to basics and learn what made MMORPGs great. Like what
mm,
made these things like the ever expanding genre of like millions upon millions of players, because I don't think of where they're currently going is it. You know what I mean? And
mm,
this is why, again, I believe in a game like Ashes of Creation, because no pay to win, no add-ons. Like there's
mm.
just so many philosophical. When I say these things to even people that love the MMORPG genre but maybe never heard of Ashes, they're like, "Oh damn! Like when is this game coming out?" Like that's like
Mhm.
the first thing they usually say.
Yeah, we've been saying that. We've been asking that for 7 years.
I know. Definitely we have. So
Yeah.
let's talk about the echo chamber, right? So the culture of buying a $250 pack creates an echo chamber. So this
Mm,
was somewhat of a statement that you said in your recent video.
mm.
Like, okay, let me ask this question first. Have you been to the Ashes of Creation Reddit?
Uh, definitely. It's been probably a
Okay,
while.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. Have you been to the Ashes of Creation forums?
Yes. I actually think the forums are less bad
Right.
than the
Okay.
YouTube comments. Yeah.
Okay. 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 So I've been in this community like since 2020, right? So
Mm,
the whole Asmongold, when he interviewed Steven Sharif, I would
yeah.
think it was July of 2020. That and the whole Lazy Peon video. That's when I got exposed to this game. So I've been
Mm,
following this project pretty much ever since. Um, I think there are people in this community that are very much vocal in certain negative aspects, right? Or maybe, and I mean negative aspects like they don't like this system and how it operates, or maybe
mm,
they do a change and they're like, I don't know if this change is the betterment of the system, or we don't know. I think this is again the problem of playing Ashes of Creation on paper, right? Because we're not playing the game physically, like we're not in the game of Vera, like doing stuff, doing these game loops. So we're only trying to do this in our heads, and we're only assuming how these systems are actually going to play out. Um, but I just want to say the whole, buying a $250 pack, and maybe this is very subjective too, so it's kind of hard to really determine if this is like a factual thing. But for me, when I bought the $250 pack, especially kind of knowing the system, or not knowing
mm,
Intrepid, knowing Steven, and especially how much he advocates to not purchase the packs. Like I'm telling you,
mm.
from 2020 to like 2022, almost in every single live stream, he would always say,
I
guys,
do remember that. Yeah.
if you're like on the fence about Ashes, please do not buy our pre-order packs. Like this is for people that like understand our vision pretty holistically and
Mm,
just want to support us, want it because, and he always says like building an MMORPG takes, millions and millions of dollars. It's a very big endeavor and stuff like that. So I think to me, when I heard him say that, it felt very genuine, because I think it's really hard to fake generosity on the internet. Like I think people can see through bullshit pretty quickly, at least in my opinion. I've always been a pretty
mm,
good judge of character.
mm.
Um, so when I see go on the forums or go on Reddit or whatever, I personally don't see a bunch of yes men. I see a bunch of people just complaining about everything like the whole time. So, I mean, do
Mm.
you want to kind of expand on this and like how you
Yeah.
think the echo chamber is created?
So there's always one in every game that ever releases, or anything, I
Right.
guess, that ever releases. Um, I think the most recent example of that was Diablo 4, which, well, I played it beforehand a little bit, and I think they were, as far as I can remember, like me and one more content creator that were actively saying like this is worrying. Like where this game is going is problematic.
Yeah.
And even if we just have played the beta, there's almost nothing there that seems to be, oh, when the full game releases, it's going to be much better. So it was, well, at least to me and few others, but it was kind of obvious that it's not going to be the thing that everyone wants it to be.
Right.
And that happens every time. Like no matter what releases, whether that was Lost Ark or Diablo or New World or anything, beforehand, people are invested in the idea of what the game could be, right? So they
Right.
have like their own headcanon. They have their rose tinted glasses. They watch all the videos and it all looks nice, and they're super excited for it. And I think that feeling is even further enhanced if you have invested something into it, right? For in that example, $250.
Right.
So in a lot of cases, people, especially when they haven't tried it themselves yet, will try to go above and beyond to defend their purchase, or maybe not even their purchase, but defend their excitement for the game.
Right.
And that creates this echo chamber that always happens. And I mean, I do appreciate the forums more, but if I go to like the YouTube comments whenever there's a new showcase, because usually I want to rewatch it so I can pause and talk about it.
Right.
Um, the YouTube comments are always like, it's this type of things people are saying there that seem like, oh, this is like the second coming of Jesus. This is the best game that has ever existed. And although there's really limited things they've shown, right? And it's always like, wow, how can you even come to that conclusion?
Right.
And that's kind of what I'm worried about in that sense. I mean, overall, having such a massive direction towards player feedback overall is a double-edged sword, right?
Right.
Because at the end of the day, some players might actually exactly know what the game needs because they have a better understanding of what it is. But I would also say a lot of people have no clue what they're talking about, and that might also be me, right? It might be anyone.
Right.
And then it's very difficult to filter out the good feedback, right? And I think humans tend to gravitate towards positivity more so than not. So even let's say if the forums and the YouTube comments are 50% positive, 50% negative, I would assume they would gravitate towards the positive reinforcement more so than anything else. But then again, that's obviously speculation, right? So at the end of the day, if the game like the Alpha 2 releases and the game has a lot of problems and the community comes together and is like, okay guys, like we don't want to refund our purchase here. We actually like what you're doing, but you need to do this, and so the game is actually good, and Ashes then follows up with something good, then that's obviously a very, very good outcome. But I think that's more often than not the unlikely one, at least in my experience. I think oftentimes when the company behind it has an inherent tendency to rely too much on feedback or ignore feedback entirely, both of the sides of the spectrum are problematic in that sense.
So and this is an aspect that I'm actually kind of worried about, but maybe in a different aspect, right? So right now Ashes Creations community is very small. There's probably like, if I had to say, maybe, and this may be exaggerative, 10 to 20,000 people that constantly like are probably in the know, that know Ashes of Creation pretty well. That's a very small segment, right? Especially towards like, there's like over 4 million people that registered on the Ashes of Creation website in like 2020, which is probably way more now than it was then. But I would say advocately, like there's a lot of people, like between 10 to 20,000 people that follow this game. We are the minority. We really are. And the reason why is because when Alpha 2 goes live and you have the thousands of variety MMORPG YouTubers, you know, like yourself, like, you know, Canon, or, you know, whoever, you know what I mean? Asmongold, Tim the Tapman, or just all these YouTubers that are going to come out of the woodwork. There's a lot of philosophical systems in Ashes that are not going to jive with, like XP debt, right? That's a huge one. The corruption system, PvP, combat. And so I'm really curious as to the approach that Intrepid is going to take regarding feedback, because if they go with, you know, most feedback wins kind of approach, like 76% of our players don't like the system, you know, if they go with that kind of approach, I think Ash is going to really fundamentally change based on that feedback.
Yeah.
But if Ash or if Steven can say, if the feedback goes against our pillars or our core fundamental foundational systems approach, then we have to ask the right kind of questions for feedback. Because if it's just a matter of, get rid of PVX servers and let's put PvE servers or something like that, that's just something Intrepid's not going to do. And to a lot of the casuals, a lot of the people that don't like PvP, which is, we haven't even talked about PvP between me and you yet, but like there's a lot of people who don't like PvP. So it's like, how, when Alpha 2 is going on, like how is Intrepid going to regard feedback in this regard, right? Because I feel like when you have 100,000 people echoing a particular system, like Asmongold's going to make a whole video on Ashes of Creation on Alpha 2 and the things he likes and dislikes, and he's going to have all of his people in his own echo chamber echo the things that he's saying. Yeah, Asmon's right. They should get rid of X system. They should get rid of X system. And then, you have another content creator, and then it just trickles down further and further. And the people that are right now in the Ashes community, the minority, the 10 to 20,000 people, are drowned out by all this feedback. So like, what do you have to say about all that? Like,
I think that's a good thought process. I do think that eventually, when this actually gets to the masses, which might not, to an extent, it will be through Alpha 2, especially through the lens of content creators, I should say, because obviously most people won't spend the $250 or haven't, because you can't right now, anyways. So in that sense, I do think that's a problematic situation they will be in, because there will be a lot of people giving feedback, like I did right now, that haven't played the game, and that's overall, like, obviously not a good feedback to have, because playing a game and looking onto it are two very different things oftentimes.
Absolutely.
And that's definitely something they have to figure out, and have to somehow create filters to kind of understand even like where the feedback is going, and also having like a strong enough vision that they won't be like faltering by the smallest, the Asmongold viewers didn't like the game, let's change how open world PvP works or whatever. So that's a tricky balance to strike, for sure.
I mean, especially I think Asmon's viewers always, especially Asmon himself, when he's watching an Ashes video, well, I don't like the generic UE5 look, let's make it more World of Warcraft stylized approach. I'm so sick of that argument personally. Like, I love the fact they're going realistic, because I think before, when realistic MMOs looked terrible because we weren't there graphically yet, look at the state of Unreal now. Like, you can make some lifelike people. Like, yes, the Uncanny Valley is still kind of there, but imagine what Unreal 6.0 is going to do. You know what I mean? Like, it's insane. So I think as long as Intrepid stays on this engine, Ashes will always look very beautiful, in my opinion. I don't think Ashes will look outdated, because even when WoW was starting to look outdated from Classic, what did they do? They revamped their engine and revamped their animation. So I don't really see the approach of like, oh, you got to make it more stylish so it can last longer, because if they ever need to, they can just update Unreal Engine and go from there. You know what I mean? So, but I will say this, like, I think the whole feedback loop, as long as Steven can stick to his core principles, which he's had, he's literally, like, even when Lucky Ghost made his video on the whole PvP corruption, the whole server approach, like, Steven basically said, this is why I say this game is not for everybody. And he's always advocated for that. I know the MMO community at large wants a new MMO to play, but he's not trying to snake oil you into thinking that this is a theme park raiding MMO and then, haha, I gotcha, it's never been an MMO. Like, he's always been very upfront with his vision. He's always been very upfront about what's in his game. And I think some people put like false promises in their own head and then want to blame Intrepid later. You know what I mean? Because they interpret what Ashes is going to be rather than really what it is. And they get mad later, you know what I mean? And I just don't think that's a fair approach, personally. So I guess we'll move on to the next one. So I have two last things. I'm so sorry. So will Ashes be figured out by the time launch happens? I think this was a very interesting thing that you brought up. And personally, I've always been an advocate for testing every aspect of this game. I personally, and I know this has also been a contentious topic because there's people that say, well, they can't show us everything in the alpha 2 because there's not going to be nothing left, when the game launches. I feel like, when it came to like Baldur's Gate 3 and people were testing out acts and stuff like that, like, you need to test this stuff out because I can guarantee you when shit is not properly tested, people will bitch and complain, and rightfully so.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So, like, will Ashes be figured out? I think to an extent, yeah. But I mean, I think any MMO gets figured out pretty quickly. You know what I mean? So I don't really think, if Ashes didn't release any content, like, okay, we'll have a month of not knowing stuff, and then the guides will be coming out for YouTube, websites will be updated, and then it's figured out. Like, you're not ever going to bypass it. So if you want to expand or talk about this particular subject being figured out.
So I don't know how closely you followed the recent Riot MMO stuff, because it's kind of a relevant discussion, because Ghostcrawler, who was the previous lead of the Riot MMO, kind of tweeted that why he left in the first place. And one of the reasons was that he doesn't want to develop a game in the dark, and like Riot is doing it. That he wants open development. He wants people to get their hands on the game early.
Right.
And I do think, genuinely, I think especially for MMOs, it's a very difficult approach if you're choosing that.
Right.
Especially considering how much people like exploration and novelty in these kind of games.
Right.
It's very hard to make it very intriguing to people if everything was already figured out. And then you kind of or that's kind of when we go back to the previous topic about packages or $250 for testing, because then it kind of becomes this FOMO situation where if you do like novelty and exploration and you don't want to just, close your eyes and ears in the internet and just be in your little shell and just go through the game. I've never heard anything. This is all new to me.
Right.
If you don't want to do that, then you kind of forced in a way to experience the game early, or as early as possible, so you get this feeling of, oh, this is all new. Like, I can just run around here and figure out how these systems work, or where this quest line is leading me, or anything, right?
Right.
And I think that is a very obviously for an indie studio like Ashes, it makes sense, because maybe they don't have unlimited funding and they do want to keep their engagement going for the game, so people keep maybe eventually buying packages again, and people can still support them over the course of the development. So it does make sense in that sphere. But overall, I think it's more of a negative if you have to do that. Obviously, you can't just say, oh, we're just going to hire 100 playtesters or 1,000, and we're going to pay them, all of them, to test the game for 100 hours. That's not the kind of money an indie studio can just throw out casually. So it absolutely makes sense the way Ashes is doing it. But I do think it is a big problem they will run into if the game releases in any reasonable amount of time, that they will run into the problem of, will new players even be super intrigued by us actually fully launching the game, because it's already literally been out and played through many times. And coming from someone who played a lot of the Korean MMOs, right, where the content was literally out for many years in another region already, it can, especially for PvE, it doesn't affect PvP as much, so Ashes has a good approach there at least. But for PvE especially, it's like it completely diminishes the enjoyment I anyways get out of a new raid releasing if there's already 50 million guides on YouTube about it.
Right. I think the way there's certain systems that can be tested over and over, and I would rather test systems than individual occurrences, because I think individual occurrences, whether it's like a single quest line, a story arc, a world boss, I personally think that you can do a world boss and test that for like a couple of days and then get it offline. And then every company always hires an internal testing bed, right? There's professional testers that are run by companies that a Trepid or Riot or Bethesda can hire and say like, hey, can you test these particular quest lines, do these things, because we don't want our players to test it or people to be cognizant of it, because we want this to be under NDA to make sure that everything is according, everything's good, so on and so forth. And that's what I think Intrepid should do. I think the caravan system, the node system, all of these huge systems should be tested in Alpha 2, and all of the more nittier, grittier, dungeon bosses or like raid bosses and stuff like that, you can have that stuff online to get us a taste of certain things. But if you want to take them offline, fine. If you want to take the whole dungeon offline, fine. But I still advocate for testing regardless, whether it's by us, the players, or some private company that does it internally, because I feel there's so many MMORPGs that feel so badly untested, and you have these like betas or alphas that it's like, what were you guys doing? And that's what I felt for New World. Like, dude, New World was like, they had a whole year extra to listen and get all this stuff underway. And again, that's why I say that particular game was so mismanaged. But I feel like that's what us, the MMORPG players, are so skeptical. Like, when I look at you, you seem so skeptical because you've been burned clearly many times before, just like myself, you know what I mean? And I think because of being burned, we can't look at it through the lens of optimism. We have to be pessimistic. We have to be skeptical because of how many AAA billion, multi-million dollar studios fumble the bag every single freaking time. And it's honestly, I think this has been the year, I would say the past 6 months to now, like, dude, indie studios, AA studios have literally been on the come up. They have literally been saving the gaming genre as a whole, because what the hell is a AAA studio bringing out? D4? Starfield? Are you fucking kidding me?
Skull and Bones?
No, the quadruple A video game. Yeah, dude. Yeah. The quadruple A game. Yeah, dude. Yeah. It's borderline pathetic what they're coming out with. And they're expecting us to pay $70 for this garbage. Like, I'm telling you, dude, like when I played D4 for the first time, I thought this was like a 2 out of 10 game. And then when I saw Darth microtransaction, Asmongold, Rax, all these people giving 8 out of 10 for D4, I was like, what crack are they smoking? I was like, what are they talking about? This is such a and again, I'm not even a fan of the RPG genre. Yeah. But the last Epoch game, half the price, more content, better class customization. Yep. It's just a better game, in my opinion. Yeah. For less of a price. And again, it's like these double half the price. I mean, it's just so crazy. I feel like indie studios have literally been the savior of 2024. Honestly, for the past 6 months, I would say, because it's always them. Like Helldivers 2 is phenomenal. Pal World, Enshrouded, these survival games, these single player games, like, have literally been saving us from severe depression. Because every single MMORPG player I talk to, like whether it's privately or in a Discord call, people are depressed, bro. Like, it's not a good time to be an MMORPG enjoyer. It's true. It just is not. So I guess to end off our conversation, how do you feel? What do you think Ashes of Creation should do leading up to the Alpha 2? Like, what do you think, as someone, again, like who doesn't immerse themselves in Ashes content, like, how do you want them to go about their live streams to a more broader audience?
I mean, this has been said many times. I think a good step would be to not have Steven play the classes, because it seems like half the time I feel like, what is this man doing? Oh my God. He's a mage teleporting into 3 melee like minotaurs. I was like, what are you doing? That's the wrong direction. And maybe I would be way more on board with the combat system if like someone would control the character in a more sophisticated manner, I guess.
Poor Steven, dude.
It's really hard to watch sometimes, and I don't know if that's the reason, right?
Right.
Like maybe that's just how it is, right?
Right.
So that would maybe help a little bit. Obviously, I completely understand that he doesn't want to do give the reins to someone else in that regard, that because it's like his thing. But that maybe that, and then overall, I think, I mean, it's hard because I also got a couple of comments below my video. It's like saying it's a little bit hypocritical because in the beginning I say there's like they're not showing anything or there's no content, and in the end I say they're showing too much, right? So it's like I understand why you would come to, come to that conclusion, but that's not really what I'm saying. So so if they want to go with a transparent development process, I would love to see more in that sense, because at that point, when the game is accessible for Alpha 2 or whatever comes beyond that, people will obviously figure things out already. So at
Right.
that point, you're not really hurting the novelty part that much anymore, because it's going to happen anyways. It's going to happen regardless. Once people get their hands on them, doesn't matter how much they pay for it, they will already know more than you. So at that point, I would love to see them say like, okay, whatever, we'll show you actually how these systems work beforehand, so you can judge even maybe without paying $250, and then make a more educated purchase when you say, wow, these systems actually do look interesting. Although now I know most things already, that's fine because I do like what I see.
Right.
So like, I feel like kind of right now they're kind of in between, showing like everything and showing like too little. It's like
Yeah.
I'm kind of confused how much they actually have, because if it's true that they're super transparent about it, then it means they don't have a whole lot of content. But if they're not showing everything about it, then they're not really transparent about it. So
Right.
which one is it? You know,
Right.
that's my confusion.
I think that's fair. I think, and this just, there's people that say that they have more, that they're not showing us that they do
Mm,
have, right? Like they have way more content that and they don't want to show everything, right? So you have like the people that
mm,
are saying like, oh, well, they don't want to show you everything during these live streams, and they want to make some kind of a,
yeah.
of a new experience for you when you go into the alpha 2. But I'll say this, the caravan live stream for me was a great example of showing a system from start to finish, going to the node, getting the caravan, building the caravan. Like they showed the entire thing, like what
Mm,
is actually going to happen. Um, I think that's something that I would like to see from other systems. But
mm,
again, are these systems online? Are these systems working from a practical standpoint? I know UI is still in progress. There's still
mm,
animations that need to be done. I think most people want combat and classes.
yeah.
We didn't talk about classes either. I actually agree with you with the 64
Mm.
classes. My chat knows I'm very much a stickler on I because I'm a class guy. Like what really gets me going in MMORPG is class customization. Like
Yeah, identity.
yes, like
Hmm.
talent trees. Like how can I wield these
Yeah.
abilities, and like what combinations can I make to create my class? Like I love that crap. That's why I enjoy.
Same.
That's why I enjoy Last Epoch, because Last Epoch does a
Mm,
great job with class identity
yeah.
and just different ways to make builds and stuff like that. It's just so much fun. So is there anything else that you want to talk about before we get off? We've been talking for over an hour already. It's crazy. This is a good conversation.
I I completely agree with the last Epoch part too. And funnily enough, when Diablo 4 came out, I already had played last Epoch a little bit,
Mhm.
and I already had that like that opinion. That's like, you have like a game made by a couple of dudes from a Reddit post, okay,
True. Very true.
and they understand this genre way better than this multi-billion-dollar company that's hiring K-pop stars and Halsey and Megan Fox to do their marketing, and they don't understand how to make a game. Like, and that was really worrying. That's why I also agree with the double A or the indie studios are on the come up, and I hope that's true, because that would mean there's much less of this manipulating. Oh, this our game is the best, but it's actually terrible. We just want you to buy it
True.
approach. So it's I do agree with that completely, and I hope that Ashes will pull through it in the end, and then I will be convinced that it's actually insane. And as I always say, I hope that every MMO is good, and especially Ashes, because they have a really good thing going for them on paper, anyways. And I hope
Right.
that it comes to fruition eventually.
So I guess so we can end the video. So are you excited for Ashes? Just say yes, dude. You know you're excited. You know you're excited.
I would say a little less than what I used to be, but I'm definitely gonna keep following it.
Okay. I'll accept that, dude. I'll accept that, dude. Neeko, dude, thank you so much for coming on and chatting and stuff
Thanks
like
for
that.
having me.
If you want to stay for a little bit of an after show, we can chat for like 10 minutes. We can answer
Sure.
comment questions, stuff like that. But guys, if you like this episode, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, hit that like button. Like I said, if you want to ever watch me live, I go randomly live on Twitch. You know, just you got to follow me. Like, I don't really have a set schedule. Maybe that's my fault. But guys, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you guys on the next. Oh, Neeko, I'm gonna link your stuff in the description below. But where can people find
Sure.
you? Good if you want to.
Neeko2lo everywhere on Twitter. I think it's Neeko2lo TV, but
Okay.
you will find just Neeko2lo stuff. Yeah.
Okay, I will have that stuff in the bottom of the description below if you want to go follow my boy Neeko, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Later, guys. All right, we're out. That was a great conversation, dude. Like actually, I have so much I want to talk to you about, like the Throne and Liberty stuff, because you played that game. I have not. I got to use the bathroom really freaking bad.
Go for it.
Give me
Go for it.
1 minute. If you guys want to answer chat questions, I'll be right back.
Thank you, Rocka. Thank you. Thank you. Bald? Yeah, not anymore. I wish I was. And Steven, to get this right, I think being cautiously optimistic is a pretty good way to look at it. Thank you. Thank you. It was fun. 20 minutes a day. It's rough out there, Schrumpel, you know. It's just like in that sense, like the positivity part, it's really apparent often, especially I think Diablo 4 was such a great example where it was really obvious, at least for me, or like some few people, that the game is not gonna really pull through. But the overall sentiment, not only in the specific Diablo community, but also like on Twitch, as he said, Asmongold and all the big content creators, like, this game is gonna be so good, at least an 8. That always kind of happens because people want to be excited about things, right? It makes sense. Like, it's just it's better to be excited about something than to be depressed about something, right?
Oh, I know about depression, dude.
Yeah.
I know about depression. Sorry, what's
My
going on?
favorite class is Shadowhunter, actually. Yes.
Oh, you're a Shadowhunter player too? Dude, that is
Yes,
that was okay. So I didn't really get to answer your question earlier. So I played Lost Ark up until the pay to win kicked in. So I got up to, what was the first? So you went from like 600 item level, then you had to go up to 800. I think it was like there was a jump that you had to make. Whenever
from tier 1 to tier 2.
Yes. I stopped at tier 2 because then it was like I found myself that I had to jump on that hamster wheel to do this stuff, or I can just pay to win and make it easier for myself, and that's when I quit. I honestly, again, the story experience, I know people like to crap on Lost Ark story, but I thought the Castle Siege cinematic into the actual Castle Siege was by far the coolest experience I had in an MMORPG. Like, I'm not even exaggerating. That was awesome. And I really hope Ashes does something that kind of bombastic, because that they have castle sieges. I mean, you can literally castle siege in Ashes. Like, if they don't do something like that to get you in the zone, to get you in that just destroying cannon fodder experience, like, what are you doing, bro? Like, you know what I mean? So that was probably the extent of my Lost Ark stuff. I did enjoy the combat to a certain extent. There was just some parts where, like I said, the rooted motion was just kind of annoying to deal with.
Which class did you play? Shadowhunter as well?
Yeah, Shadowhunter. And the other thing I didn't like about Lost Ark was its tripod system. It was so bare bones to me. Like, I wanted, if it had like a WoW talent tree in Lost Ark, oh my God, like I would have probably loved it. But the fact that you just had a choice of 3 options like per row just kind of felt like it didn't.
Yeah, I can see that.
It just didn't feel as good. You know what I mean? Like,
it's hard to make like creative builds in Lost Ark for sure, because it was already out in Korea anyways, and oftentimes the options are very obvious. So it's not. Yeah, I do think the tripod system had some potential, but they didn't really even try to make it balanced, I think, because I don't know if you know, but later on you can level up the tripods. So I think they kind of try to make some tripods better than others, just so there's like a like items that you get for the tripods are more interesting for the good ones, obviously. So you have a lot
Right.
of bad tripods, and it's kind of like an economic thing
Right.
where, oh, this tripod item has the exact ones that I want,
Right.
and that's why it's like expensive or whatever.
So
Yeah.
I guess to ask you questions on Throne of Liberty, because my guild has been looking forward to this game because we want to do like the castle siege stuff and kind of prepare for Ashes in a way. Like so did you get to play it with the updated combat now? Like, have you played?
Yes.
Okay. How is it? Like, how is this
So
game now that it's been evolved?
my opinion obviously is a little bit with a grain of salt because I didn't play a lot. I
Okay.
only played until level like 15, maybe. Like in the first one, I was a little bit higher, but in the second one, since I already saw most things, I didn't really bother going much higher than I was.
Okay.
So I think it's an okay combat. Well, before that, I would have given it like a 0 because it was literally autoplay.
Yeah, that's
Um,
stupid.
Now I think I appreciate the effort that they said, okay, let's actually make this a PC video game that you can actually play by yourself. So it's probably closer to like a 2 or 3 combat system out of
Out of
10.
10. Oh,
Yeah, which is, I mean,
they have a long way to go still.
I think some people will enjoy it. Like if you're like a lineage player or someone that is a little bit more accustomed to very strict tab targeting, maybe even stricter than something like WoW is, um,
Wow.
then I think it's fine. Like in that sense, if you're into those, there is an audience for that. There's still a lot of people, especially in Korea, playing Lineage. So in that sense, yeah, of course it's a little bit better. But I think the one thing that would like, if I compared it to classic WoW,
Right.
the one thing that I think is worse than classic WoW, which is a crazy thing to say, right? Because classic WoW is 20 years old, is there's an option that you can disable, to be fair. But if, let's say, I'd use a melee ability and the mob is too far away from me, my character will then automatically walk to the mob. So unlike in WoW, when you're too far away, you click the button, says, I'm not in range.
Yeah.
This is too far away.
Right.
Your character just walks, and he walks to the mob and just attacks it with the ability then. You can disable it, but it does make the game feel cheaper, if that makes sense. It does make it feel more like a mobile game to me.
And I
Yeah.
think this is where the whole monetization comes in, because Throne of Liberty is going to be on mobile, right? Isn't
I'm not. I think they have like some sort of third-party streaming thing for mobile. I think it's not directly on mobile, but you can have like,
okay.
I don't know how that works, but yeah.
And again, this is where I think the identity and foundational pillars of Throne of Liberty, there was no one with a vision for that project, because that project went through hell. 11 years. You mean tell me after 11 years, you guys couldn't solidify a combat system? And again, this is where I think the bureaucracy of making a game in a large studio, where certain things take over, that even your lead game designer has to play ball, otherwise they're out. We'll get someone else that'll play ball with our monetization. You know what I mean? And I think that's exactly what happened with NCSoft, right? Because NCSoft does Throne of Liberty, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just so unfortunate. This is why I have a hard time looking forward to an MMORPG by a AAA studio, by like a well-known studio nowadays, whether it's Blizzard, Bethesda, EA, Activision, even Riot. Like, I'm not a Riot boy. Like, I don't play League of Legends. Like, I know they have a great track record with their games, but I am still skeptical with them because, again, MMORPGs done right, they can make a shit ton of money, dude. They just can. Yep. And I think for any kind of a multi-million-dollar studio, why would you not do stuff to monetize your game, right? So I have a very hard time like trusting these companies and really giving them the benefit of the doubt that they can actually not only do a game that is actually really fun and enjoyable to play, but also doesn't have egregious freaking monetization. And again, I think, guys, if you want to watch a really good conversation on pay to win, go watch their podcast. There's a podcast that Neeko does with Canon. You'll recognize Canon. He does a lot of really great videos for a bunch of Korean MMORPGs and just MMORPGs in general. But they did a recent episode on pay to win. You can go watch that. But yeah, it's just so unfortunate with Throne of Liberty, dude. Like, and again, I think when it comes out, it'll be successful for like a couple of days or even a week, and then within a month, it'll. I mean,
that's what happened in Korea.
What?
Yeah.
Even in
In
Korea?
Korea, it did, even on launch, it did surprisingly poorly. I think I
Whoa.
again, I don't know how accurate these numbers are, but there's like a Korean PC Bang rating where they have like very popular PC cafes, and they have statistics on what games are played there. And usually that's, although it's obviously not 100% accurate, but they're fairly accurate statistics on how popular games are. Um, and I think not Lost Ark, Throne Liberty did about as well on the launch day as BDO did today. So like when Throne Liberty released, it had around the same player numbers as BDO had at the same time. So not on BDO launch, but like now. And BDO
Right.
now in Korea isn't very popular at all. It's like tenth of the size of Lost Ark. So it's like even on the launch day was already kind of like a low outcome, a low turnout,
Right.
and that just has gotten down a lot. They also ran into a lot of bot problems because since the game is still a fairly simplistic combat system, obviously, the bots were running rampant in even Korea, where you do need a social
Wow.
security number. So it's it's if that happens over there, will
Jesus.
definitely happen here. And
Oh
with
my
Amazon
God.
Games' track record of dealing with bots in Lost Ark, that's not that's not a good sign because Lost Ark is still overrun by bots. Maybe not
Yeah.
as much as it used to be, but it's still pretty apparent. It in that sense it was problematic. I did talk to Canon a lot about Throne as well because he played it way more than I did,
Right.
and he
Yeah.
actually got to the castle sieges and did all of those things. And he said that the end game of the game, so especially the sieges and the guild versus guild stuff, is much better than what you're experiencing in the early game. So that's definitely if you're into this kind of large scale PvP stuff, especially if it's more about the organization of things, like strategy and moving as a guild and those kind of things. I think the game could be interesting to some people, and like obviously graphically, it's nice, and even the end game bosses to an extent seem decent. But I think the combat system will still hold it back immensely, and it also completely depends on how like severe the pay to win will be, because Amazon Games have shaved off some pay to win in Lost Ark as well, so they will adjust it probably. But there will definitely still be pay to win to an extent. So we will see how that turns out.
I don't know if you know this. Are Koreans more um I would say conditioned
Mm,
to like pay to win MMOs? Or like let's say if Ashes of Creation is available in Korea,
mm,
does a game, because Lineage was very popular back in its heyday in Korea, but Lineage became very much heavy monetized, like,
mm.
you know, would a game that is $15 a month to play, no pay to win aspects, does that attract a Korean audience, or do they not like when a game isn't pay to win? I'm just
So
curious.
I think they're much more adjusted to pay to win than we are. And they're much more accepting of it as
Right.
well. I
Okay.
wouldn't say they like it necessarily. Some people definitely do. But as in general, I think they probably wouldn't say we like pay to win, but they're not as uh,
Opposed.
opposed. Yeah, exactly. Not as opposed to pay to win as we are, definitely. There's also, especially in Lost Ark, there's almost a culture of people kind of bragging about maybe even spending money. And there's like this, I don't know what I think they call people who don't pay to win rice farmers because they're just I don't really know the context that much, but there's like an entire thing
Jesus.
where people want to have this kind of investment in the game to an extent and want this. I don't know if this is a status symbol or whatever, but there is definitely a culture of pay to winning over there where people are proudly pay to winning without really it being a negative thing in that sense. But I would say in general, it's more positively looked upon than in the West for sure.
Wow. I don't know. I really hope that Ashes is available in Korea, because again, I would rather advocate for a game with a smaller player base that is very much lively, right? That actually like, because I know people always want like millions of people to play their MMO, right? But I'm talking worldwide. As long as Intrepid is profitable at the end of the day, I don't care if there's 20,000 people playing in North America. As long as there's 3.5 million people playing in Korea, 1 million playing in Brazil. Like, I don't like, again, if you look at the numbers worldwide, I think a lot of PvP based MMOs do very well in other countries, not really so much North America. So I just don't like how some companies really want to monetize like certain regions, like when they don't really like it. I understand if Koreans are accepting of it, but I think they would rather feel like they're earning their game rather than just paying for their game, right? Like when you get on your game and you're actually like grinding it out, you're doing, you're putting in the work, you know what I mean? Rather than just, well, I logged on, I got $1,000 loaded into my cash card and we're about to let it rip, boys, and it's like, I don't know, like I can't get behind that kind of mentality and playing a game, because are you really truly playing that game after all? You know what I mean? Like, the game's kind of the game's kind of playing you at that point, which I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Let me see. I just want to see if chat said anything. But dude, I honestly, Neeko, dude, I just want to say, thank you so much for coming on my very niche, small podcast, what I mean? But I really enjoy your content. I actually appreciate your video. Again, I know there's people that didn't like your take, they didn't like your opinion or whatever, but I think context is important. You know what I mean? And, I think I consider myself a pretty known Ashes content creator. So I think if people can at least listen to this conversation and actually get proper context, because it's hard to give all your takes and all of your opinions on in a even an 18-hour or 18-minute video, which is why I wanted to bring you on, right? Because there were some things I wanted to get clarification. I was like, what did he exactly mean when he said this? Because it's just, it's just curious, right? Because again, I also didn't know, like, are you looking at Ash's content on a daily basis? Like, do you know this game very well? Do you know its systems very well? Because again, there's a shit ton of systems in this game. There's a shit ton to know, and there's just not a lot of people who know it. You know what I mean? And again, the circles that I run with, they all know it, because again, we entrench ourselves in this content every day. But I also feel like there's people that get upset for having an opinion on something, even if they know it from a very surface level, because they're like, well, you should have done more research, and you should have done like at least like 10 hours of research before you made a video on this. Because it's like, well, no, like, we need people, even on a surface level, to react to certain things and to give opinions on certain things. Like, I don't consider that like disingenuous or like malicious. It's just, hey, based on what I saw, this is what I feel about what I saw. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think again, there's just certain people that they want Ashes or their MMO to succeed so badly. And when someone goes against their beliefs or goes against their favorite MMO, it's like all hell breaks loose. You know what I mean? I'm sure you experienced it in the BDO community. You see someone talking shit about BDO or like saying something, and they're like, they might be uneducated on BDO. You know what I mean? So it's just like,
it happens everywhere. And I think it's, as you said earlier, also, it would be nice to have even more people that are more surface level than me to also showcase what their experiences so far and what they're expecting from the game.
right.
Because as you said, like, the people who are really entrenched and understand and immersed in this project are the minority after all. So if they do want to attract like a larger player base, they do want this perspective of people that aren't as knowledgeable.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I want this game to succeed. I want MMOs to succeed, but I think the thing about especially when it comes to the AAA industry right now, that their prioritizations are profits and their shareholders and the whole monetization practice, and that's never going to be in the favor of the gamer. It never is.
True.
And so this is why I think the indie industry, companies like Intrepid, companies like 11th Hour Games, companies like Larian are so really important, because they are the gamer pioneers. These are the people that got fed up with what AAA has been doing, and they decided to take it upon themselves to make their own game. And I think that's very admirable. And honestly, like, thank you, because if you didn't do that, if Last Epoch just left it as a Reddit post,
true,
we would we have to play Diablo 4 if we want an RPG. You know what I mean? Like, fuck that. You know what I mean? And again, even because of D4, Last Epoch pop off, and so did Path of Exile, because those are the, again, people are having a conversation about Last Epoch, but also Path of Exile's been there for almost 11, 12 plus years. So It's like,
They
hey, let's.
also were birthed out of Diablo 2, right? Because they
Oh
didn't
yeah,
really, yeah. So it's I think that's a very honorable thing to do, especially if there's not much else coming out. It's important that companies like that step up eventually. Yeah.
yeah. And we were talking about the, I don't know if you know, but Amazon Games is going to make a Lord of the Rings MMO.
Yeah. I heard they tried that before and then they canceled it and now they're trying it again.
I have no faith whatsoever. And again, it's going to be such a travesty because I know a lot of people love Lord of the Rings. I mean, the property itself is so popular. It's so unanimous with, like, Dungeons and Dragons and just,
Yeah.
the whole genre of MMORPGs. And they're going to bungle it so bad. It's
Mm,
because they're using the Lumberyard engine again, which had a lot of issues with New World, and they're going with that again. I think that was definitely an on high decision because I guarantee you, if it was left to developers, they would not be using Lumberyard because they
yeah.
absolutely hate it. But again, this is the whole problem. There's literally a top down approach, right? On high, we say this, you grunts do that. And there
Yeah.
isn't a person with a central vision or a certain way that they want to create this MMORPG experience for the gamers, because they're
Mm,
literally looking at it from a complete monetization aspect. Like, what aspects of this game are we going to monetize? Like, what game loops are we going to monetize? Are we going to do cash op? Are we going to do, costumes? Are we going to do like more pay to convenience? Are we going to withhold like stash tabs? All this
mm,
stuff. Like, that's what they're talking about early on. They're not talking about their lore. They're not talking about their main characters. They're not talking about combat design. They're literally talking about monetization. And what's so messed up is that I have a couple of friends that are in the gaming industry, and that's the kind of the emails, and that's literally the kind of stuff that
mm,
their bosses, their managers are talking about, is these kinds of systems, these kinds of principles. And it's very much, if you go into like the gaming industry with such passion and vigor, that they will stomp that shit out of you within the first
mm,
month or a couple of months, because you are now part of the corporate machine. You do what we tell you to do. And it's sad, bro. It is so sad, because I can't imagine if you literally went to school to be a game developer, you finally made it, you're working for X company, right? Like X AAA
mhm.
studio, and you're there and you're living the dream. Well, now you're living the nightmare, because now you're realizing exactly what goes into making these games, and it's not good. It's not good.
Yep. And I think that's what we hear a lot. Oftentimes that there's a lot of passionate developers that just can't really realize what they want to do because they are, as you said, stumped out by that.
Yeah. Well, Nico, I'm gonna go ahead and end off stream. I gotta go spend time with my wife. If you want to stick with me for a little bit longer, chat. Thank you so much, everybody that came on. I really, really appreciate you guys coming on and hanging out with us. Again, I will be linking, of course, the YouTube video, all of Nico's stuff. You know where you can find him on Twitter, Neeko2lo TV, and then of course at Neeko2lo on YouTube. Um, Again, special shout out to him. Thank you so much for coming on,
Thanks
guys.
for having me, man.
Thank you so much for watching. We will see you guys on the next one. Later, guys.
Bye bye.